After my husband passed away, we divided the inheritance, and my greedy daughter-in-law gave me a cardboard box with a note. This fits everything you deserve. When I revealed the truth about the will, she begged for forgiveness. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I never imagined that after 45 years of marriage, my entire worth would fit into a single cardboard box. 6 weeks had passed since I laid Walter to rest. 6 weeks of numbness, of waking up reaching for someone who wasn't there anymore. The grief? Counselor said it would get easier, but she never mentioned the second blow that was coming. The reading will be at 2 o'clock on Thursday, Martin had said, his voice gentle when he called. Martin Sawyer had been our attorney for over 30 years, and I could hear something strange in his tone. Concern, perhaps. Walter's wishes need to be addressed. That Thursday, I wore the navy dress I'd bought for our 40th anniversary. Walter had always loved me in navy. The law office felt colder than I remembered, with its polished mahogany and leather chairs that seemed to swallow. You whole. Daniel and Heather were already seated when I arrived. My son didn't stand when I entered, just looked at me with empty eyes that had once held so much warmth. Beside him, Heather examined her manicure, those blood-red nails tapping impatiently against her designer purse. Mom? Daniel nodded, the word falling flat between us. Martin entered, carrying a folder, his face unreadable as he sat behind his desk. Thank you all for coming. I know this is a difficult time. He cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses. I'll proceed with the reading of Walter Montgomery's last will and testament. The words washed over me like ice water. The house Walter and I had purchased when Daniel was just 3 years old, left to Daniel. The retirement accounts we had carefully built over decades, primarily to Daniel. The vacation property in Maine, where we'd spent every summer, to Daniel. And for me, Walter's wife of 45 years, a modest monthly stipend that wouldn't even cover rent in a decent apartment and his personal effects. There must be some mistake, I whispered, my fingers gripping the armrests. I'm afraid not, Catherine, Martin said, his eyes not quite meeting mine. This document is dated from 18 months ago and is legally binding. 18 months ago, right when Heather had started, spending more time at our house, always whispering to Walter when I left the room, when Walter had become secretive about finances for the first time in our marriage. Well, Heather said, standing and smoothing her skirt, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. That all seems straightforward enough. The drive back to the hotel was a blur. I'd been staying there since the funeral, after Heather had suggested that Daniel and I could use some time to process in the house. Now I understood the true meaning behind those words. I had just sat on the edge of the hotel bed when there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Daniel, holding a large cardboard box. Heather thought you might want Dad's personal things, he said, not stepping inside, not looking at me directly. He set the box down just inside the doorway. Daniel, I said, reaching for his arm. Your father and I built everything together. The house, the savings, everything. How could he? Mom, please don't make this harder. He stepped back, breaking. My touch. Dad knew what he was doing. He always did what was best for the family. Before I could respond, Heather appeared beside him, her arm slipping possessively around his waist. We went through and gathered everything that was specifically Walter's, she said with a thin smile. It all fits perfectly in there. As they turned to leave, Heather paused, reaching into her pocket. She withdrew a folded note and placed it atop the box. Almost forgot this, she said, her eyes gleaming with something cold. Take care, Catherine. The door closed behind them with a soft click. With trembling hands, I unfolded the note. Cabe tudu kivasimares. It fits everything you deserve. My legs gave way as I sank to the floor beside the box. Inside were a few photographs. Walter's. Favorite sweater, his reading glasses, some old watches, and his collection of baseball cards. 45 years of marriage, reduced to a cardboard box of trinkets. I ran my fingers over his reading glasses, remembering how he'd squint at the morning newspaper, refusing to admit he needed bifocals until I finally dragged him to the optometrist. The worn leather of his favorite wallet still held the faint scent of his cologne. My phone rang, startling me. It was Patty, my best friend since college. "Kate? How did it go?" Her voice was warm, concerned. I tried to answer, but all that came out was a sob. "I'm coming over," she said immediately, and hung up. 20 minutes later, Patty sat beside me, on the hotel bed, her arm around my shoulders as I told her everything. "It doesn't make any sense," she said, shaking her head. "Walter adored you. Everyone knew that." "Apparently not everyone," I whispered, looking at the pathetic box on the floor. "And that note? That's just cruel." Patty's voice hardened. "That's Heather through and through. She's been working on Daniel for years, you know that." I nodded slowly. Heather had always been charming when she needed to be, especially around Walter. But I'd seen the way she looked at our house, our possessions, with a calculating gleam in her eyes. "What will you do now?" Patty asked gently. I stared at the cardboard box, this container that supposedly held everything I deserved after a lifetime, with Walter. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely audible. For the first time in my life, I truly don't know. What I didn't say was that something felt wrong. Deeply wrong. Walter had always been meticulous about our finances. Always, talking about making sure I was taken care of if anything happened to him. The will Martin read today didn't sound like my husband at all. As the evening shadows lengthened across the hotel room, I sat with the remnants of my marriage in a cardboard box, wondering how the man who had held my hand through cancer celebrated every milestone and whispered "I love you" every night for 45 years could have left me with so little. Not just financially, but with this profound feeling that everything I believed about our life together might have been a lie. The morning light filtered through Patty's kitchen curtains as I sat at her breakfast table, staring into a cup of coffee. I couldn't bring myself to drink. It had been 3 days since the reading of Walter's will, and I was still wearing the same clothing I'd worn to the hotel. Patty had practically forced me into her car yesterday, refusing to let me wither away in that depressing room. "You're staying with me until we figure this out," she'd said, in that no-nonsense tone she'd perfected during 40 years as a high school principal. Now she placed a plate of toast in front of me that I knew I wouldn't eat. "Catherine Montgomery, you need to eat something," Patty said, sitting across from me. "You can't fight if you're weak." I looked up at her. "Fight? Fight who, Patty? My own son? The ghost of my husband?" My voice cracked. "I don't even know what happened." The doorbell rang before she could answer. Patty returned moments later with my granddaughter Lily, whose presence immediately lightened the heaviness in my chest. "Grandma!" Lily rushed to embrace me, her 15-year-old frame still somehow fitting perfectly against my shoulder like when she was small. "I've been texting you for days." "I'm sorry, sweetheart." My phone. I realized I hadn't charged it since the reading. "Mom dropped me off at the mall," Lily explained, pulling back to look at me with those intelligent eyes so like Walter's. "I told her I was meeting friends, but I took an Uber here instead." "Patty texted me where you were." Patty winked at me from across the room. "Teenage rebels can be useful." "Grandma, what's going on? Dad won't talk about it, and Mom keeps saying weird stuff about financial restructuring and how we'll be more comfortable now." Lily's face crumpled slightly. "And they're already packing up Grandpa's things. Mom's talking about converting his study into a home gym." A sharp pain lanced through my chest. Walter's study had been his sanctuary, with his beloved books and the antique desk where he'd taught Lily to play chess when she was barely tall enough to see the board. "Your mother works quickly," I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "They're selling stuff too," Lily continued, her voice dropping. "The silverware set, Grandpa's watches, even that painting from your trip to Venice. Mom says it's liquidating unnecessary assets." "Those aren't hers to sell," I whispered, though legally, I wasn't sure that was true anymore. Lily reached into her backpack and pulled out something wrapped in a scarf. "I took this before she could sell it too." She unwrapped it carefully, revealing Walter's pocket watch, the one his father had given him when he graduated from college. "He always said this would go to you someday," I told her, tracing the worn gold surface. "I know. That's why I couldn't let her sell it." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "Grandma, something's not right. Dad's acting strange. He's drinking more. And they're fighting at night when they think I can't hear." Patty sat down beside us. "What are they fighting about, honey?" "Money, mostly. And—" Lily hesitated. "Mom keeps saying they need to move quickly before something happens. And last night she was yelling about some documents Dad was supposed to destroy but didn't." My eyes met Patty's across the table. Something cold and certain settled in my stomach. "Lily, do you remember Mr. Sawyer? Dad's lawyer?" I asked carefully. She nodded. "The nice old man with the bow ties?" "I need to talk to him," I said, more to myself than to them. "Something isn't adding up. You think the will might not be legitimate?" Patty asked cautiously. "I don't know," I admitted. "But Walter always told me everything was arranged, that I'd be taken care of. This doesn't sound like him." Lily looked. Between us, her young face serious beyond her years. "Mom's been weird ever since Grandpa got sick. She was always going into his study when he was taking his medication, saying she was helping with his affairs." A knock at the door interrupted us. Patty went to answer it, returning with Martin Sawyer, looking grave in his tweed jacket and perfectly knotted bow tie. "Catherine?" he said, removing his hat. "I'm glad I found you. I've been calling." "My phone." I gestured vaguely. "I understand." He nodded to Lily, then looked at me with an intensity that made my heart race. "I need to speak with you privately. Anything you need to say, you can say in front of Patty and Lily," I replied, reaching for my granddaughter's hand. Martin set his briefcase on the table and sat down. "I've been reviewing some irregularities in Walter's legal files. The will, we read. I have concerns." "What kind of concerns?" I leaned forward. "Walter came to see me 3 months before he passed. He wanted to update his will." Martin removed his glasses, polishing them with a handkerchief. "I drafted the new document myself, but then I went on vacation for 2 weeks. When I returned, Walter told me everything was handled. I assumed he meant he'd signed the will in my absence, perhaps with another attorney present." "But?" I prompted, feeling a flutter of something that might have been hope. "The will we read last week wasn't the one I drafted. The format, the language, it's different." He looked at me gravely. "I've been going through my records, and I found notes from my meeting with Walter. His instructions were very specific. About providing for you, Catherine. Very specific indeed." My hands trembled as I digested this information. "Are you saying the will might be fraudulent?" Martin chose his words carefully. "I'm saying there are serious questions that need to be investigated. Unfortunately, proving fraud is complicated, especially when it involves family members." "Mom took a lot of papers from Grandpa's study right after he died," Lily interjected. "She put them in her closet safe." Martin's eyebrows rose. "That's very interesting." "What do we do?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed. "For now, we investigate." "Quietly," Martin advised. "If there was a legitimate, more recent will, we need to find it. And if there was tampering." He left the sentence unfinished. After Martin left, I sat staring at the cardboard box of Walter's belongings that I'd brought to Patty's. It still contained everything Heather thought I deserved, a collection of trinkets and memories. But now, looking at Walter's reading glasses and worn wallet, I wondered if they contained something else too. The truth about what really happened in those final months. For the first time since the funeral, I felt a spark of something beyond grief. Determination. If Heather thought Walter's death would be her opportunity to take everything we'd built, she'd severely underestimated the woman who had stood by his side for 45 years. I picked up the pocket watch Lily had rescued, feeling its familiar weight in my palm. Walter always said that time revealed all truths eventually. Perhaps he was right. I'm not going to let them erase you, Walter, I whispered to the empty room. And I'm certainly not going to let them erase me. The next 2 weeks unfolded with painful slowness as I settled into an uneasy routine at Patty's apartment. Each morning, I'd wake up disoriented, momentarily forgetting Walter was gone, then remembering everything at once. The funeral, the will, the cardboard box, the betrayal. Martin was investigating the will situation with careful discretion. The legal approach needs to be delicate, he'd explained. If we make accusations we can't prove, it could backfire terribly. Meanwhile, Lily had become my eyes and ears in the family home, texting me discreetly about Heather's activities. The messages tightened the knot in my stomach. Mom sold Grandpa's golf clubs today. Dad looked like he wanted to say something but didn't. They're repainting the living room. That shade of blue you and Grandpa picked is gone. Mom's talking about renovating the master bedroom. Says she wants to cleanse the energy. Each update felt like another erasure of the life Walter and I had built. 45 years of marriage, being systematically dismantled in a matter of weeks. On Friday afternoon, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Mrs. Montgomery? This is Angela Forrester from the accounting firm. I sat up straighter. Angela had been Walter's assistant at the accounting firm where he'd worked until his retirement 5 years ago. Angela, it's good to hear from you. I've been meaning to call since the funeral, she said, her voice hesitant. I'm not sure if this is important, but something's been bothering me. What is it? I asked, my heart quickening. About 4 months before Mr. Montgomery passed, he came into the office. He wanted to access some of his old files, said he needed to review some financial documentation for estate planning. That sounds like Walter, I said, smiling despite myself. Always meticulous. Yes, well, Angela continued. He seemed worried. Not his usual self. He asked me to make copies of certain documents and had me notarize a statement. He said it was insurance, though he didn't elaborate. My hands tightened around the phone. Did he take these documents with him? Some of them. But he also had me put a sealed envelope in the firm's secure storage. He said someone might need to access it someday and gave specific instructions that it could only be released to you or Mr. Sawyer. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Angela, is that envelope still there? That's why I'm calling, she said, lowering her voice. Yesterday, Mrs. Montgomery, your daughter-in-law, came to the office. She had a letter supposedly signed by you, authorizing her to collect all of Mr. Montgomery's remaining personal effects from the firm, including any stored documents. My blood ran cold. I never wrote such a letter. Angela's voice grew even quieter. I didn't think so. The signature looked off. And Mr. Montgomery's instructions were very clear about who could access that envelope. I told her I needed to verify with management before releasing anything. Thank you, I breathed. Angela, that envelope could be extremely important. I thought it might be. That's why I'm calling from my personal phone, not the office line. She paused. Mrs. Montgomery, I don't want to overstep, but Mr. Montgomery was always very kind to me. If someone is trying to go against his wishes. They are, I said firmly, and I intend to stop them. After ending the call, I immediately phoned Martin. He agreed to visit the accounting firm first thing Monday morning to secure whatever Walter had left there. That evening, I sat on Patty's balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. For the first time since Walter's death, I felt something beyond grief, a quiet anger simmering beneath the surface, and with it, clarity. Heather hadn't just manipulated the will. She was systematically erasing every trace of me from the life Walter and I had built together, selling our possessions, redecorating our home, trying to access Walter's private documents, all while Daniel watched in complicit silence. I thought back to when Daniel first brought Heather home 8 years ago. She'd been charming, attentive, asking questions about family heirlooms and complimenting our home. Walter had been reserved in his judgment. "Something about her feels calculated," he'd said, but I'd dismissed his concerns as overprotectiveness. Over the years, her influence over Daniel had grown. My once thoughtful son became increasingly distant, canceling family dinners last minute, forgetting birthdays, making excuses why they couldn't visit. Heather always blamed work pressure or Lily's busy schedule, but her satisfied smile told a different story. Walter had noticed the change too. In his final months, as the cancer weakened his body but not his mind, he'd spend hours in his study, organizing papers, making phone calls when I was out of the room. "Just getting things in order," he'd say when I questioned him. "Making sure everything's taken care of." I had interpreted it as his way of preparing for the inevitable, of trying to make his passing easier on me. Now I wondered if there had been more to it, if he'd recognized the threat Heather posed and tried to protect me in his methodical, careful way. My phone chimed with a text from Lily. "Mom found out I took Grandpa's watch. She's furious. Says, everything in the house legally belongs to them now." I texted back, "Are you okay?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. "Yes, Dad actually stood up for me for once, said some things should stay in the family. Mom didn't like that." Small spark of hope flickered in my chest. Perhaps Daniel wasn't completely lost after all. Another text from Lily appeared. "Grandma, I found something weird. There's a business card in Grandpa's desk drawer with a phone number and call if anything happens, written on the back. It's for someone named Thomas Reed." The name wasn't familiar, but the message sent a chill through me. Walter had left breadcrumbs, little pieces of himself scattered for me to find after he was gone. The envelope at the accounting firm. This mysterious business card. Perhaps even other clues I hadn't discovered yet. Walter had known something was wrong. He'd tried to warn me in his own quiet way. As the sky darkened and stars began to appear, I made a promise to myself and to Walter's memory. I would follow his trail, piece by piece. I would reclaim what was rightfully mine, not just material possessions, but dignity. My place in the story of our life together. Heather thought she'd reduced me to the contents of a cardboard box. She was about to discover how greatly she had underestimated Catherine Montgomery. Monday morning found me sitting in Martin's office, watching as he carefully opened the envelope Angela had retrieved from the accounting firm's secure storage. His hands, spotted with age but still steady, broke the seal with the letter opener Walter had given him for his 65th birthday. "Well," Martin said, his eyebrows rising as he removed a stack of documents. Walter was certainly thorough. He spread the papers across his desk. Financial statements, property deeds, investment records, and, most importantly, a sealed envelope marked "Last Will and Testament of Walter Montgomery," with a date just 3 months before his death. "This is the will I drafted," Martin confirmed, examining the document inside. "The legitimate one." My throat tightened. How different is it from what was read? Martin scanned the pages, his expression growing increasingly grim. "Entirely different. This will leave the house to both you and Daniel. with you retaining lifetime residency rights regardless of ownership changes. The majority of the financial assets are left to you, with specific trusts established for Lily's education and future. He looked up at me. Catherine, under this will, you'd have complete financial security and significant control over the REIT estate. A wave of relief washed over me, followed immediately by a surge of anger. Walter had protected me, just as he'd promised. But someone, and I had little doubt who, had deliberately suppressed his true wishes. There's more, Martin continued, lifting additional papers. Walter documented suspicious activities over the last 2 years. Notes about Heather accessing his computer when he was on medication. Records of unexplained transfers from their joint accounts. Even a transcript of a conversation he recorded between Heather and someone named Thomas Reed. The name struck me like a physical blow. Lily found Reed's business card in Walter's desk. Martin nodded grimly. According to this transcript, Reed is a document specialist. Reading between the lines, it appears Heather hired him to create a convincing forgery of Walter's will. Forgery, I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. So the will that was read was almost certainly fraudulent, Martin finished. Walter suspected Heather was planning something, so he created this evidence cache. He lifted yet another document, including this signed statement testifying that he believed Heather was attempting to manipulate his estate planning and that any will dated after this one should be considered suspect without his explicit confirmation to both me and you. I pressed my hand against my mouth, tears threatening. Even from beyond the grave, Walter was still protecting me, still fighting for us. What happens now? I asked, forcing my voice to remain steady. We have 2 options, Martin explained, steepling his fingers. We can directly confront Daniel and Heather with this evidence and demand they recognize the legitimate will, or we can file a formal petition with the probate court challenging the fraudulent will. If we go to court, it becomes public, Martin confirmed, and potentially more damaging for everyone involved. Forgery of a will is a serious crime. I thought of Daniel, weak-willed and manipulated, but still my son. And Lily, who would be devastated if her mother faced criminal charges. Let's try the direct approach first, I decided. But I want to be smart about this. They've already shown they're willing to break the law. Martin smiled slightly. Walter always said you were the strategic one in the family. That afternoon, I made a call to the mysterious Thomas Reed, using the number from the business card Lily had found. I didn't identify myself, simply asking about his document services for estate planning. I don't do that kind of work anymore, he said curtly. Really? I was referred by Heather Montgomery. She said you were extremely helpful. A long pause. Look, lady, I don't know what you're after, but I'm not getting involved in that situation again. That family's got trouble written all over it. What kind of trouble? I pressed. He laughed humorlessly. The kind where the wife wants documents altered while the husband's on his deathbed. The kind where I got half my fee and then got ghosted when people started asking questions. I'm done with that mess. After I hung up, I called Patty. I need a favor, I told her. I need you to invite Daniel, Heather, and Lily to dinner at your place tomorrow night. That's an interesting request, Patty said carefully. May I ask, why? Because I'm done hiding, I replied. It's time to start moving the pieces. Patty's dinner invitation was accepted with suspicious reluctance by Heather, who likely assumed it was another opportunity to assess what I knew. Little did she realize she was walking into a carefully laid trap. The next evening, I busied myself in Patty's kitchen, preparing Walter's favorite pot roast. The familiar routine of cooking, chopping vegetables, searing the meat, measuring. Seasonings steadied my nerves. You're sure about this approach? Patty asked, setting the dining table. No, I admitted. But it feels right. Walter always said you should give people a chance to do the right thing before forcing their hand. At precisely 6:30, the doorbell rang. Lily entered first, giving me a surreptitious hug. Daniel followed, looking uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes. Heather came last, her smile tight and calculating as she took in the domestic scene. "How?" "Cozy," she remarked, handing Patty a bottle of wine. "Catherine, I'm surprised to see you playing hostess in someone else's home." I smiled pleasantly. "Some skills you never lose, Heather, like cooking or recognizing a forgery." Her smile froze. Daniel's head snapped up. Lily looked between us, sensing the sudden tension. "Let's sit down," I continued, carrying the pot roast to the table. "We have quite a lot to discuss." As we took our seats, I noticed Heather's hand trembling slightly as she reached for her water glass. Daniel's face had gone pale. They knew something was coming. They just didn't know how thoroughly their deception had been uncovered. I served the meal with practiced ease, making small talk about the weather, asking Lily about school. The forced normalcy stretched the tension thinner with each passing minute. Finally, as I served the apple pie, Walter's favorite dessert, Heather's patience snapped. "What is this about, Catherine? This little performance of yours?" I sat down, the pie server, and looked directly into her eyes. "It's about doing the right thing," I said calmly. "It's about honoring Walter's true wishes, and it's about giving you one chance, just one, to fix this before things get much, much worse for you." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, what are you talking about?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded paper, a copy of Walter's real will's first page. "I'm talking about the fact that the will that was read in Martin's office was a forgery," I said, sliding the paper toward them. "And I have proof." The silence that followed my accusation was absolute. Heather stared at the document, her face cycling through expressions: shock, calculation, and finally, a mask of indignation. "This is ridiculous," she said, pushing the paper away. "Some desperate attempt to cause trouble." "Thomas Reed," I interrupted quietly. "Does that name sound familiar, Heather?" Her face drained of color. "Who's Thomas Reed?" Daniel asked, looking between us. I kept my eyes on Heather. "Why don't you tell him?" When she remained silent, I continued, my voice steady. "Thomas Reed is a document specialist who creates forgeries. Walter recorded a conversation between him and Heather discussing the fabrication of a new will. That recording is now in Martin Sawyer's possession, along with Walter's real will." Daniel turned to his wife, confusion etched on his face. "Heather, what is she talking about?" Heather's composure cracked. "She's lying. She's just upset about the will and trying to cause problems." "Am I lying about the envelope Walter left at his accounting firm?" I asked. "The one you tried to retrieve using a forged authorization letter with my signature?" Lily gasped softly. I hadn't meant for her to hear all this, but perhaps it was time she understood what kind of person her mother truly was. Daniel's expression had shifted from confusion to dawning horror. "Heather, tell me you didn't." Heather's strategy changed instantly. Tears filled her eyes as she reached for Daniel's hand. "I was just trying to protect our family. Your father never liked me. You know that. He was going to cut us out." "That's not true," I said firmly. "Walter's actual will provides generously for everyone, including you and Daniel. He just ensured I wouldn't be left destitute." I removed another document from my pocket, a full copy of Walter's legitimate will, and placed it on the table. "Read it yourself." Daniel took it with trembling hands. As he read, his face crumpled. "Dad never intended to leave Mom with nothing. This will is completely different." Heather switched tactics again, her voice hardening. "It doesn't matter. The will that was executed is the one on record. Possession is 9/10 of the law. Forgery is a felony," I countered. "Martin is prepared to file charges first thing tomorrow morning." "You wouldn't," Heather hissed. "You wouldn't put your own son through a public scandal." No, I wouldn't, I agreed, meeting Daniel's eyes. That's why I'm here tonight. I'm offering a solution that keeps this private. Daniel looked utterly lost, a man watching his world crumble around him. What solution? The legal will is honored, I said simply. Everything returns to the distribution Walter intended. Any items already sold are accounted for and their value subtracted from your portion. No charges filed, no public scandal. Heather's laugh was brittle. And if we refuse? Then Martin files charges for will forgery, fraud, and attempted theft of estate assets. The investigation will be thorough, public, and devastating. The threat hung in the air between us. Lily, who had been silent until now, suddenly pushed back her chair. You did this? She asked her mother, her young voice trembling with betrayal. You forged Grandpa's will? You tried to take everything from Grandma? Heather's face hardened. You don't understand adult matters, Lily. I understand. Right and wrong, Lily shot back, tears streaming down her face. And this is wrong. She stood up and moved around the table to stand beside me, her hand finding my shoulder in a gesture that nearly broke my composure. Daniel finally looked up from the will, his face ashen. We need to fix this, he said quietly. Daniel. Heather's voice rose sharply. No, Heather, Mom's right. This is wrong. He turned to me, shame written across his features. I didn't know about the forgery, Mom, I swear. But I should have questioned it. I should have known Dad would never leave you with nothing. You still have a chance to make it right, I told him. Heather stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This isn't over, she warned, grabbing her purse. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Actually, I do, I replied calmly. I'm dealing with a woman who thought she could erase me with a cardboard box and a cruel note. You severely underestimated. Me, Heather. She stormed toward the door, turning back when she realized Daniel wasn't following. Are you coming? Daniel looked between his wife and me, conflict written across his face. For a moment, I saw the boy he had once been. Thoughtful, kind, with Walter's sense of integrity. I'll meet you at home, he said finally. I need to talk to my mother. Heather's eyes narrowed, but she left without another word, the door slamming behind her. The room seemed to exhale. Patty, who had remained a silent witness to the confrontation, stood up. Lily, why don't you help me clear these dishes? I think your dad and Grandma need to talk. When they'd left, Daniel and I sat in silence for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, he began to cry. Quiet, shuddering sobs that he tried to muffle with his hand. I'm so sorry, Mom, he whispered. I've been such a fool. I moved around the table and did what mothers have done since time immemorial. I held my child while he cried. I knew something wasn't right, he continued, struggling to compose himself. The will didn't sound like Dad, but Heather was so insistent, and I let myself believe it because it was easier. Your father always said you had a good heart but needed to find your backbone, I told him gently. A sad smile flickered across his face. He was right. As usual. What will you do now? I asked. Daniel's expression grew serious. First, we're going to honor Dad's real will. Everything goes back to how he wanted it. He hesitated. And then I need to take a hard look at my marriage. This isn't the first time Heather has manipulated situations. I squeezed his hand. Whatever you decide, I'm here. You're still my son. He nodded, wiping away tears. I don't deserve your forgiveness. It's not about deserving, I said. It's about family. Real family. After Daniel left to face the inevitable confrontation with Heather, I sat with Patty and Lily in the quiet kitchen. The tension of the evening had left me exhausted, but strangely peaceful. What happens now? Lily asked, her young face serious. Now we put things back the way they should be, I told her. Your grandfather made sure of that. As I helped Patty wash the dishes from our disrupted dinner, I thought about the cardboard box Heather had given me. That box meant to contain everything I deserved after 45 years with Walter. How fitting that it had instead become the first piece in dismantling her scheme. Walter had always loved chess, taking pleasure in the strategic placements, the careful calculations, the patience required to see 3 moves ahead. Tonight, I felt him beside me, whispering his favorite phrase when he'd make a winning move. Checkmate, my dear. Checkmate. 3 months have passed since that dinner at Patty's apartment. The seasons have shifted from the crisp autumn when Walter died to the first tentative buds of spring. Life, as it inevitably does, has moved forward. The legal matters were resolved more quickly than I expected. Faced with overwhelming evidence and Daniel's unwillingness to continue the deception, Heather had no choice but to concede. Martin handled everything with his typical thoroughness, filing Walter's legitimate will with the probate court and ensuring the proper transfer of assets. I'm sitting now in the sun-drenched living room of my new home, a modest but charming 2-bedroom cottage, just 10 minutes from Lily's school. I didn't want to return to the house Walter and I had shared. Too many memories, too many shadows. Daniel understood, and under the terms of the will, the house was sold, with the proceeds divided according to Walter's wishes. The doorbell rings, pulling me from my thoughts. Lily stands on the porch, backpack slung over one shoulder. Grandma! She hugs me tightly. Dad dropped me off. Is it still okay if I stay the weekend? Always, I tell her, ushering her inside. I've got your room already, and I bought those. Peanut butter cookies you like. Lily heads to her room, the second bedroom I've decorated with her preferences in mind. The walls are a soft teal, her favorite color, and the bookshelf holds both classics from my collection and new young adult novels she's interested in. A space for new beginnings. Watching her settle in, I marvel at her resilience. The past months haven't been easy for her. Daniel filed for divorce 3 weeks after the truth about the will emerged. During their separation, he discovered Heather had been spending money from their joint accounts on lavish gifts for another man, a betrayal that hardly surprised me, but devastated him nonetheless. Lily has been staying with Daniel on weekdays, and with me most weekends. She rarely talks about her mother who moved to Chicago last month with her new boyfriend. Some wounds take longer to heal. The doorbell rings again. Daniel, coming in for a quick coffee before heading to his therapy appointment. These visits have become our new routine, a careful rebuilding of the relationship that nearly fractured, beyond repair. The house looks great, Mom, he says, accepting the mug I offer him. Those curtains are new, aren't they? I nod, pleased he noticed. Patty helped me choose them. We settle into comfortable chairs on the back patio, watching as Lily wanders through the small garden I've started. How are you doing? I ask, studying his face. The shadows under his eyes have lessened, and he's gained back some of the weight he lost during those awful weeks when his marriage imploded. Better, he says, and I believe him. The therapist says I need to stop beating myself up about what happened. She's right, I tell him. Guilt looks backward. Responsibility looks forward. He smiles faintly. That sounds like something Dad would say. It was, I admit. One of his many nuggets of wisdom. We sit in comfortable silence for a moment, both lost in thoughts of Walter. Daniel breaks it first. I found these yesterday, he says, pulling a small envelope from his pocket. I thought you might want them. Inside are photographs I haven't seen in years. Walter and me on our wedding day, young and radiant. Walter holding newborn Daniel. The 3 of us at the beach house in Maine. Walter teaching a toddler Lily to build a sandcastle. Where did you find these? I ask, tracing Walter's smiling face with my fingertip. They were in Dad's desk drawer at the house. Heather must have missed them when she was clearing things out. The hesitation in his voice tells me he's still struggling to talk about Heather's actions without anger. "Thank you," I say simply, holding the photos close. After Daniel leaves, I add the photographs to the memory book I've been compiling, not just for myself, but for Lily and any other grandchildren that might come along. Walter's story, our story, preserved in its truth and completeness. Later that evening, as Lily and I prepare dinner together, she asks the question I've been expecting. "Do you miss Grandpa a lot?" I pause, knife hovering over the carrots I'm chopping. "Every day," I tell her honestly. "But not in the same way as before. It's softer now." She nods, her young face serious. "I think he would like this house. And that you're okay now." "I think so too," I agree, marveling at her perception. That night, after Lily has gone to bed, I sit on my small front porch with a cup of tea, watching the neighborhood settle into evening stillness. My phone chimes with a text from Patty. "Book club tomorrow? New member joining us. Martin's friend Harold. He's a retired English professor and single. Just saying." I chuckle, shaking my head at my friend's transparent matchmaking. I'm not ready for that yet. May never be. Walter was my partner for 45 years. That kind of love leaves marks that don't easily fade. But I'm grateful for Patty's persistent belief in my future, for Daniel's efforts to rebuild what was broken, for Lily's resilient affection, for Martin's steadfast support through the legal battles, for the small community that has formed around me, ensuring I was never truly alone, even in my darkest moments. And I'm grateful, in a way that still surprises me, for Heather's cruelty. That cardboard box with its dismissive note. Without meaning to, she gave me exactly what I needed, the spark of indignation that burned away my paralysis and forced me to fight. My gaze drifts to the stars appearing in the darkening sky. Walter loved stargazing. On summer nights, he'd spread a blanket in our backyard and name the constellations for me, his voice quiet with wonder at their ancient light. "I see you in the stars," he'd told me once. Constant, bright, guiding me home. Now I look up, feeling his presence not as a sharp pain of loss, but as a gentle certainty. He is part of me, woven into the fabric of who I am. No cardboard box or forged document could ever contain or diminish that truth. Inside my new home, Walter's reading glasses rest on the shelf beside my favorite books. His watch sits on my bedside table, still keeping perfect time. The small mementos that Heather thought worthless turned out to be priceless after all. Touchstones of a love that transcends paper and property, that continues beyond final breaths and legal battles. In the months since Walter's death, I've learned that grief isn't something you overcome. It's something you incorporate. The pain becomes part of your landscape, less jagged with time, but always present. And strangely, there's comfort in that permanence, the understanding that what we've lost remains with us precisely because it mattered. Tomorrow, I'll wake up in this house that is solely mine. I'll have breakfast with my granddaughter. I'll work in my garden. I'll decline Patty's matchmaking efforts with kind but firm humor. I'll continue building this new life, piece by piece. The life Heather thought she could deny me. The life Walter trusted me to find. The life that was always within me, waiting to emerge from grief's shadow. As darkness falls completely, I whisper to the stars, to Walter, to myself. I'm still here. I'm still whole. And I am so much more than what fits in a cardboard box. The quiet that follows. I feel Walter's approving smile, as real as the night air against my skin. Some bonds cannot be broken. Some connections never truly fade. And some victories aren't about winning at all, but about reclaiming the dignity that was always rightfully yours. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.